If only I had known how it would all end. The words keep echoing in my mind, like the hum of the city that never truly sleeps. New York, steel, glass, and neon veins running endlessly under the skin of the night. Back then, when I first stumbled upon him, the city felt like a promise. Now it feels like a ghost, whispering of everything I once had and lost. It was late autumn, the kind where the wind slices through you no matter how tightly you clutch your coat. I remember the traffic lights casting their fractured glow on the wet asphalt, the steam rising from subway grates, and the constant rhythm of footsteps. Strangers brushing past with their own invisible stories. I was one of them, anonymous, a shadow among millions. Until I wasn't. I had missed my train. The station was suffocating, so I surfaced onto the street, grumbling under my breath, clutching the strap of my bag. I ducked into a café I had never noticed before, small, tucked between a glossy clothing boutique and a hardware store, as if it didn't belong. Inside, the air was warm, heavy with roasted coffee and cinnamon. The windows fogged from the contrast between cold night and bustling life indoors. People leaned into each other over chipped mugs, voices low, laughter spilling across scratched wooden tables. And there he was, sitting alone in the corner, a book open in front of him but untouched, his gaze drifting to the rain-streaked glass. His hair caught the dim light, dark and slightly tousled, like he had just run his hands through it in distraction. He looked lost in thought, lonely, almost. I should have chosen a seat far away. I should have kept my distance. But fate, or whatever cruel trickster plays with human hearts, pulled me closer. The only empty chair was beside him. "Is this taken?" I asked, trying to sound casual, though my voice trembled. He looked up, and in that moment the city fell silent. His eyes, gray, with flecks of something I couldn't quite name, met mine, and I felt both exposed and sheltered. "No," he said, with a smile that reached only halfway. "Please." The conversation began like most do in cities where strangers collide, hesitant, polite. I set down my coffee, pulled out a book I knew I wouldn't read, and tried not to notice the way his presence filled the space between us. He was the one who broke the silence. "You missed your train too?" he asked, his voice low but warm. I blinked. "How did you?" He tilted his head toward my bag, where my Metro card peeked out. "It's written on your face. You look like someone whose night took a turn." I laughed, a little embarrassed. "Guilty." "Same here," he admitted. "I was supposed to be downtown an hour ago. But I got distracted. By the rain, mostly. I like watching the way it distorts the city." I followed his gaze to the window. The street beyond shimmered, headlights stretching into liquid streaks, pedestrians blurred into watercolor silhouettes. "It makes everything softer," I said. "Like the city is trying to hide its sharp edges for once." He looked at me then, not just at me, but into me. "Exactly." We spoke for hours, though it felt like minutes. His name was Daniel. He was an architect, he told me, though he seemed almost reluctant to mention it. He preferred talking about books, music, films that had shaped him, places he wanted to see but hadn't yet. And I, who usually stumbled over small talk, found myself unraveling in his presence. I told him about my job in publishing, my love for street photography, how the city sometimes suffocated me but also gave me oxygen. At some point, he reached across the table, gently straightening the edge of the book I hadn't opened. His fingers brushed mine. Just a flicker of contact, but my pulse stuttered. When the café finally announced closing, we stepped outside together. The rain had stopped, leaving the air sharp and electric, puddles reflecting the fractured glow of neon signs. "Which way?" he asked. "Uptown," I said. "Downtown," he replied, a small smile tugging at his lips. The city stretched between us, vast and indifferent. But neither of us moved. I don't usually do this, he said softly, pulling a pen from his coat pocket. He took my hand, hesitant, respectful, and wrote his number across my palm, the ink slightly smudging in the damp air. In case you miss another train. I laughed, though my chest ached with something unfamiliar. Maybe he'll start missing them on purpose. That night I couldn't sleep. His voice lingered in my mind, the way he looked at the world as if searching for hidden meanings. I kept staring at the numbers on my hand, afraid to wash them away. It should have been nothing, a chance encounter, one of those fleeting city stories that fade as quickly as they appear. But it wasn't. Because when I finally called him, everything began. And if only I had known how it would all end the first time I called him. My hands trembled so much I nearly dropped the phone. It was late, too late, probably. Midnight in New York doesn't carry the same silence as other places. The city still breathes, restless and alive. I almost hung up before he answered. Hello? His voice was rough with sleep. I froze. Oh God, I am sorry, I didn't think you'd, he chuckled softly. No, don't apologize. I am glad you called. I sank into the corner of my bed, staring at the glow of streetlights bleeding through my curtains. It's just I couldn't stop thinking about the other night. About the CAF. Neither could I. His words landed softly, but they left a mark. The days that followed blurred into a rhythm of texts and stolen hours. We met in odd places, coffee stands at dawn, bookstores tucked into side streets, the High Line just as the city lights blinked awake. Daniel had a way of noticing things most people ignored. The reflection of a skyscraper in a puddle, the sound of a saxophone drifting from a subway platform. The tiny garden someone had built on a fire escape. One evening, we walked along the Brooklyn Bridge. The wind tangled my hair, and the city stretched out before us, glittering, endless, full of possibilities. You know, he said, his hands tucked into his coat pockets, sometimes I feel like this city is both the best and worst thing that ever happened to me. I glanced at him. Why the worst? He hesitated, eyes on the skyline. Because it takes everything from you. Time. Energy. Pieces of yourself. And you give them willingly, because it convinces you it's worth it. But some days he trailed off, his jaw tightening. And the best? I asked softly. This time, he looked at me. Because it brought me to you. My breath caught. I didn't know how to respond, so I laughed nervously, brushing a strand of hair behind my ear. But inside, my heart was unraveling. We began to belong to each other in unspoken ways. He'd show up at my office with coffee when I had long deadlines. I'd sneak into his studio late at night with takeout because I knew he'd forget to eat when he was sketching. His studio was a world of half-finished models and rolled-up blueprints, pencils scattered like fallen soldiers across the floor. He always apologized for the mess, but I loved it. It was a place alive with his mind, his passion. One night, as he worked on a project, I leaned against the window, looking at the city lights. Do you ever think about leaving? I asked. Leaving New York? He raised an eyebrow. Yeah, just packing up, starting somewhere else. Somewhere quieter. He smirked. What, like the suburbs? I nudged him with my foot. No, idiot. Somewhere real. A small coastal town. Paris. Florence. Anywhere but here. He set his pencil down, studying me. If you left, I'd go too. My chest tightened. I wanted to believe him, wanted it so badly that it almost hurt. Not everything was easy, though. There were shadows. Sometimes, he disappeared into himself, shutting me out without warning. Days when his eyes grew distant, when he'd stare at his phone but never answer calls. If I asked, he'd smile and brush it off, just work or just tired. But I could feel the weight in him, heavy and unspoken. One night, after he had gone quiet for nearly 3 days, I confronted him. Daniel, what's going on? We were sitting in Washington Square Park, the fountain dry for winter, students hurrying past with scarves wrapped to their ears. "Nothing," he said too quickly. "Don't do that." My voice broke sharper than I intended. "Don't shut me out. If there's something wrong," he sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I don't want to drag you into my mess." "Maybe I want to be dragged in," I whispered. His eyes softened then, and he reached for my hand. "You already are. More than you know." I didn't press further. But his words lingered, like a warning wrapped in tenderness. Winter thickened around us. Snow fell in heavy curtains, muffling the city's roar. We spent Christmas Eve together in his apartment, drinking cheap wine, watching the Empire State Building glow red and green from his window. "Tell me a secret," I said, curled against him on the couch. He smiled. "A secret? Yes. Something you've never told anyone." He was quiet for a long moment, then said softly, "I am afraid of being ordinary." I looked up at him. "You? Ordinary? You couldn't be, even if you tried. You don't understand." His gaze fixed on the ceiling. "Every day, I design buildings that might never exist. I chase deadlines for people who don't care about beauty, only money. And I wonder what's the point? What if everything I do just disappears one day, and no one remembers I was even here?" I touched his face, forcing him to meet my eyes. "I'll remember." Something broke in his expression then, and he kissed me like it was both a thank you and a surrender. But life in a city like ours doesn't pause for love. There were always obligations pulling us in opposite directions, my endless manuscripts, his demanding clients. Sometimes, whole weeks slipped through our fingers, and I feared we'd drown in the current of our separate worlds. Yet somehow, every time we found each other again, it felt like coming up for air. One evening, months after that first night in the CAF, we returned there together. The same scratched tables, the same hum of espresso machines. "Déjà vu," he said, brushing his fingers over mine. "I almost didn't sit down that night," I admitted. "Then I would have had to chase you down." He smiled, but then his expression grew serious. "Do you ever wonder how different life would be if we'd never met?" "Constantly." I let the words hang between us before adding, "But I don't want to imagine it." He exhaled, almost in relief, and squeezed my hand. The truth is, I didn't want to imagine it either. But a small, trembling part of me knew the city, and life, had a way of changing everything when you least expected it. That night, as we walked home under the amber glow of streetlights, I thought about something he'd once said, that the city gives and takes in equal measure. And though I didn't know it then, I felt the faint chill of something slipping, something I couldn't yet name.